Welcome to Civil Service School. Today we are going to learn about Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that is RCEP. Recently, our Prime Minister has declared in Thailand that India is not going to join RCEP. Let's know why. What is the reason? Dear friends, if you are personally benefited from our service, please subscribe to our channel. These are the RCEP countries. This is actually ASEAN plus 6. These Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia are these ASEAN countries. There are total 10 members in ASEAN, and Japan, South Korea, China, India, Australia and New Zealand. These are 6 countries, that means ASEAN plus 6. This was actually RCEP prior to India leaving that board. Now RCEP is minus India. These are the countries. So why India has refused to join RCEP? See, China is a huge trading behemoth in this region. RCEP would have given would have leveraged business to a huge extent. India has already huge trade deficit with China, and if we give more benefit to Chinese businesses, to Chinese exports, then that trade deficit will expand more. Trade deficit means export difference between import and export. India has huge import than export, so there is a huge trade deficit. RCEP would have given China an upper hand as it is already a huge manufacturing base. Amongst the 15, 16 RCEP countries, India has serious trade deficit with at least 11. In 2013-14, this trade deficit was $54 billion. That means India is a net importer amongst these RCEP countries, and this trade deficit has further increased up to $105 billion in 2018 and 19. That means we are already lagging behind in terms of export, and that is not a good sign. Increasing export means declining forex reserve. Forex reserve will decrease. Forex reserve means foreign exchange reserve. Suppose we are buying oil from Saudi Arabia, then we pay Saudi companies. That means suppose we are buying oil from Aramco, then Indian companies like BPCL, IOCL, etc. will pay Aramco in forex term. That means suppose we are paying them in dollar, we will not pay them in Indian national rupee. So whenever export increases, this forex reserve decreases, and decreasing forex reserve is not a good sign, because we will need that forex in terms of emergency. In times of emergency, that means we may need to buy some. Suppose we are buying some weapon from some foreign countries, then we will need that forex reserve. And as per this scenario, India is already having a huge decrease in forex reserve whenever we are having business with 15 RCEP countries, as we have trade deficit with 11 of them, and China is already a huge trading behemoth. So we are already frightened because of Chinese export. Why it is opposed by farmers and industries? We know why industries are opposing, because India is a huge market for industries, and whenever there is some kind of protectionism, that is all actually good for homegrown industries. They need some kind of protectionism from government. But whenever that protectionism is removed, import from foreign countries will increase. As we already know that coal import coal import from Assam to steel industries Tamil Nadu is already costly as compared to coal import from some Chinese coal mine to Tamil Nadu. That means our internal trade is as compared to as compared to when we import something from foreign countries. That means import is more favorable when protectionism is not there. That's why domestic industries are opposing RCEP. That means they are fearful of a bad bad scenario for domestic industries. But why farmers are opposing? Why? What is the reason? Let me have a look. These are these are Indian dairy products. Like, we use dairy as allied activity of agriculture to increase farmers' income. Our farmers are largely small scale. They produce these dairy products for their locality, for their community, and they sell these products by their own. Means they are mainly sustaining on these products, and there is a huge livelihood concern for these dairy farmers. But whenever trade restrictions are removed, there will be a huge import of dairy products from Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand are advanced countries. There are some more advanced, technologically advanced farms in these countries. This is suppose Australia. In Australia, actually, there is a huge desert area in between at the middle of the country. Most of the cities are located at the border with ocean. Cities are located here, and there is a huge desert area, and there are huge grassland, and most of the farmers are doing commercial dairy farming in these regions. So their main intent is commerce. As it is a huge business, their input cost is less, and so they can sell their products at a very competitive price globally. And that can be harmful for Indian dairy farmers. So Indian dairy farmers are apprehensive of farmers from Australia and New Zealand. That's why they are opposing RCEP. Pepper and cardamom, rubber and coconut would face dumping from South Asian spice measures. As for example, Sri Lankan spice. Most of the Southeast Asian countries are actually littoral countries. There is huge coconut production. There are ocean, suppose there are ocean and coconut are produced in these regions. So there is a abundance of coconut production in Southeast Asian countries. And Sri Lanka produces a huge amount of tea and spice. Already Indian tea and spice industry is facing the brunt of Sri Lankan spice and tea industry. So if RCP is made, that means trade restrictions are removed, free trade is given preference, then Indian pepper, cardamom, rubber and coconut industry will face the brunt of Southeast Asian production from Southeast Asian countries, as for example Sri Lanka. Vietnam and Indonesia have very cheap rubber. So Indian rubber manufacturers from Kerala will face the brunt here also. Already Niti Aayog's, that's why farmers are opposing RCEP. Already India's Niti Aayog report in 2007 was apprehensive of FTA. As per the report, import from FTA countries, FTA stands for Free Trade Agreement, increased while export did not match up. That means our import increased but export it did not match up. Means export is somewhere remain stagnated or somewhere higher or somewhere lower. But import is continuously increasing. That means huge trade deficit. So we are apprehensive of FTA. Because let me tell you one thing, because most of these countries who want to have an FTA with India, they are looking at big market of India, but these countries don't have big market as like India. So India has a huge consumer base, and that is already targeted, that is actually targeted by industries from these FTA member countries. But India has finally come out of RCEP. India said a huge no to RCEP. But before moving out from RCEP, India has given some proposals. Let's have a look at what are those proposals. India has proposed a auto trigger mechanism. It is actually a shield against sudden and significant import surge from countries. Auto trigger of safeguard duties to safeguard duties to save domestic industries. Suppose our import duty is 1%. Suppose with Vietnam, and all countries, suppose we have import duty of 1% with all these RCEP countries. Suppose from Vietnam our import volume has increased to 350 billion dollar, and we will set a threshold value like 150 billion dollar. If the import from Vietnam is up to 150 billion dollar, then import duty will be 1%. That is very less. And if import goes above that 150 billion dollar, suppose it has goes to 350 billion dollar, then we will have a safeguard duty. We will have a safeguard duty imposed on those imports from Vietnam. Suppose that safeguard duty is 6%, and India has proposed this thing, that India has proposed a auto trigger mechanism. That means if import from a certain country in cross a certain threshold, then auto trigger of safeguard duty will be imposed. India has proposed this, but there was not consensus. Consensus could not be built, and India has decided to come out of RCEP. And Japan has already said that if India don't be a part of RCEP, then Japan will also not be a part of RCEP. Japan will also not be a part of RCEP. Former Australian Prime Minister has already said that India has come out of RCEP because she was fearful of Chinese export to India, and India has done a great thing by coming out of RCEP. Former Australian PM has said this. So let me have a look. So are you skeptical that if India come out of RCEP, it will not get the benefit of FTA with all these 15 countries of RCEP? Will it be detrimental for India, as it will lose opportunity to trade with a huge volume of countries? Are you skeptical? Are you skeptical that India is not benefited from RCEP? Let's have a look. India already has FTA, free trade agreement with ASEAN. That means 10 countries plus Japan plus South Korea. That means plus 2 countries. Plus India already has free trade agreement with 12 countries, and 3/4 of bilateral trade happens zero duty. India already has a preferential trade agreement with China. All of you know that India can't have a free trade agreement with China. Otherwise, all the Indian business will be taken over by China. So PTA is good for India in a relation with China. FTA is good if import duty is high. Suppose there is a country X and there is a country is Y. Suppose X country has import duty of 10%, and Y country also has import duty of 12%. If there is a FTA between these countries and they have agreed that as per the FTA their common import duty will be 2%, then there will be less import duty on trade between these two countries, and so trade will be enhanced. So FTA is beneficial for countries when there is a large import duty on exports. If import duty is high, FTA is beneficial. But if import duty is less, suppose import duty of 1% and 2% for both the countries, then FTA is not beneficial, because FTA will reduce import duty up to how much it will reduce, up to 2% or around 0.5%. Then FTA will not be at all beneficial. But India, Singapore and Hong Kong have import duty zero, as India is a MFN, that is most favored nation. That means India can export to Singapore and Hong Kong for zero import duty. Means all an FTA is already established between Singapore, Hong Kong and India. And 60% import is zero duty for all countries, for Malaysia, Japan, Australia, New Zealand and Brunei. That means Australia, New Zealand, Brunei, Malaysia, Japan, these have import duty of 0% for 60% import for all countries. That means import from India, that is 60% of import from India to Australia, New Zealand, Brunei, Malaysia and Japan is already zero duty. That means that is equivalent to India is having an FTA with Australia, New Zealand, Brunei, Malaysia, Japan. So total there is 2 countries and 10 plus 2 plus 2. That means 14 countries. With 14 countries, India has FTA equivalent treaty already, and with China, that is 15 country, India has FTA equivalent treaty already. That means with India, all the 15 countries have RCEP like agreement already. That's why RCEP is not at all required for India, as we have already made arrangement for having equivalent relation as that of RCEP with all ASEAN plus 5 countries. Whenever there is a FTA, special sourcing requirements, these are not negotiated in FTA. Suppose whenever Reebok set up a apparel manufacturing company in India, then there is a 30% local sourcing requirement. That means if Reebok makes shoes, then 30% of inputs of shoe manufacturer should have to be taken from local Indian manufacturers. That means that is 30% is local content requirement. So Reebok cannot import all the inputs from foreign countries. 30% it will have to take from local country, and that is a special sourcing requirement. And these things are not negotiated in FTA. In FTA, only import duty is cut. Only import duty is reduced, but these sourcing requirements are not negotiated, and these are actually non-tariff barriers. Tariff barriers, there are some tariff barriers also, and tariff barriers are that import duty, safeguard duty, safeguard duty, countervailing tax. All these are tax barrier. Let us have a look about investment. What will be the scenario of investment without RCEP? In Australia in 1987, 80% of car manufactured in Australia, car manufacturers were from Australia. That means 80% of car used domestically were manufactured in Australia. After 1987, Australia has reduced import duty on import duty is reduced on car import. Now in 2019, almost 0% of car 0% of cars used domestically in Australia are produced by local manufacturers. That is, the local manufacturers like Mitsubishi, Hyundai, etc. have already shifted their base locations out of Australia. That means, and this is happening only because Australia is reducing import duty. Because of reduction of import duty, that car manufacturers are shifting their base to some more favorable FTA countries, and Australia is losing industrial base of car manufacturers. Most of the cars are imported now, and the scenario is same for India also. India has a very thriving car manufacturing industry with that of Maruti, Hyundai, TVS, Bajaj, etc. If import duty is reduced as per RCEP, then there is a chance that import from foreign manufacturers, import from China or Taiwan will increase to India, and local manufacturers will face the heat of huge import. That means their competitiveness will increase, but their production will decrease and their revenue will be decreased, and ultimately they will face the brunt of reduction of import duty. So RCEP is not good for investment always. So what is the way forward? So way forward is we have come out of RCEP, but there is some way forward, like how India can have huge growth in the coming years. Our growth is already 4.5%. Our GDP growth rate is 4.5% now. So we want to have 9% or more GDP growth rate. What are the way forward? How can we get the benefit of a non-RCEP regime? Lower duties on raw materials to reduce input cost. Suppose car manufacturers, there are some inputs like steel, iron, etc., and import duty on these inputs should be reduced so that end product become more competitive and they can take the global market easily. Logistics cost should be reduced. India has a huge logistic cost. Suppose we want to transport a transport a truck of oil oil from, suppose, from Arunachal Pradesh to Kanyakumari, then our logistics cost will be very high as compared to developed countries, and that logistic cost should be reduced by using port connectivity through Sagarmala project and inland waterways project. If logistics cost is reduced, then our output cost will also be reduced, and then we will get cheaper products than exports, than imports, than our imports. We will get cheaper products than our imports. Then that will be beneficial for domestic industries. Our domestically we have a huge market, and that domestic market should be galvanized. That means we need to explore more on the domestic market. We need to increase consumer demand in the domestic market. Then our if we increase consumer demand, our GDP will already increase, because consumers will buy more and more products, and this will give a boost to manufacturing and services sector, and this will increase GDP of the country. Dear aspirants, thanks a lot, and if you are personally benefited from our service, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.